Okay, and welcome everyone to tonight's presentation of Your Space. This is a family space session, strengthening relationships with validation, and we've got Marlene Traficante with us tonight. Carrie was unable to join today's session, and we're really looking forward to hearing from Marlene and sharing some examples and developing and increasing our capacity to support our young people with validation. So I'm going to step aside and hand things over to Marlene. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So thank you so much for having me. I'm really pleased to be able to be here and talk to you about the idea of strengthening relationships with validation. I think this way a little more. This way?
It's like the opposite of what our brains
The
want us.
opposite of what to do. Okay, I think I found myself in the middle now. So the information that I'm going to share with you is based on emotion-focused family therapy, and that was an approach that was developed by Dr. Joanne Delhonte and Dr. Adele LaFrance. And we have been really fortunate in our community to have both of them come in and provide excellent training for a number of staff across different agencies. And for myself, I've been doing this work for a long, long time, and I have to say that this approach has made such a huge difference in terms of how I approach my work and how I feel that we are supporting families and caregivers much more effectively doing this. So I'm really pleased to be able to do this with the webinar. Starting with just acknowledging that parents, primary caregivers, so the folks who are providing primary care for young people, whether that be parents, grandparents, aunt, uncle, foster parents, they have a very, very important role, and in fact are the most important people in a young person's life. And so what we want to do is focus in on giving you a bit of information and one specific skill that will really empower you to do that even better. Just remember, I have to go here to change my slide, right?
Yes.
Okay. So this idea of advanced caregiving skills, we want to acknowledge that you are already doing the best that you can with the skills that you have. And we know that parents, often are parenting more than one child, and they may say to themselves, like, everything I'm doing seems to be working just fine with this one or these two. And yet I have a child who's really struggling. And that child is potentially has developed some mental health difficulties, experiencing mental health symptoms. And what we want you to know is that for those children, you need more than the usual parenting. And that's why we refer to advanced caregiving skills. Because we know that you have so much to offer to all of your children. And so to the child who has those extra needs, we want to really focus in on another skill. So just wanted to start by having a sense of who's in the audience. If you could answer this poll about how old the child or youth that you're thinking about this evening when you came registered for the webinar, how old they are, so we have a sense of age range. And so I think that Haruka, right, looks after that. So I'll just wait a minute to see the answer. And as you are going in and selecting the age range, I'd like to emphasize that this approach, the emotion-focused family therapy approach, is applicable across the ages. And there is a lot of work that is done with families of little ones, school age, teenagers, young adults, and actually a lot of work is done with family members who have adult children. So definitely appropriate across the ages. So having a look at the response rate here, it would appear that we have at least half of our audience thinking about a child between the age 6 to 12. And then we are looking at one quarter, 13 to 17, and the rest 18 and up. So I will try to keep that in mind as we go along. But I think it's nice for you to know, so who's out there and who's interested. So what's important to think about when we're thinking about the advanced caregiving skills? What we know for sure is that mental health issues have a huge impact on children and their families. It influences the way that family patterns develop, how people relate to each other. We know that parents, caregivers of children with mental health difficulties are often feeling very overwhelmed, exhausted, and searching for things to be better. We also know, and this is really important, is that caregivers do not cause mental health difficulties. So oftentimes we'll be talking with parents and we know that they have that thought, is it something that I did? Is it something that I didn't do? And what we need you to always hold on to and remember is that it's never one thing, right? So it is not that caregivers have caused those mental health difficulties. We have to think about genetics and temperament and life stressors and puberty and so many more factors when we're looking at what's behind mental health difficulties. And we actually don't know all of the answers. However, one thing that we know more about is that when our young people are avoiding their own emotional experience, that can actually contribute to the development of mental health difficulties, but it can also make things stay longer. We talk about feeding the mental health issue. So something that I want you to keep in mind, because this is something we can actually change by using this skill of advanced caregiving. We can move into helping them move toward emotion rather than avoid it, and then towards healing. So this is the goal. When a child or youth has a painful, stressful experience, where they're experiencing emotional distress, we would like them to have a really optimal response from the environment. Because if the environment can respond to them in a way that they are more comfortable with their emotional experience, they are going to develop confidence, right? So when these tricky emotions come up, they're not going to feel totally lost and overwhelmed and wanting potentially to give up or run away, but rather, yeah, this is tough, this is difficult, and it is manageable. Because we do not want them to be in a position where they do not have healthy coping strategies and they end up developing those maladaptive coping strategies. And by that, we can mean, disorders like an eating disorder, substance abuse, getting into a pattern of avoidance and potentially developing depression, anxiety, or oftentimes with teenagers and young adults, if they are feeling like the environment is not responding to them in a positive way, they may only go to their peers for advice. And that isn't always the most helpful. Okay, so I want you to just have a look at this diagram. We have that lovely healthy tree with a huge root system below. And at the top, we see some things that can come up for caregivers. So there are times where, as parents and caregivers, and I'm including myself in this, we can find ourselves potentially maybe accommodating a difficult behavior or enabling a difficult behavior. And that can be because we see our young person struggling, it's very painful, and the last thing we want to do is for them to experience more pain or more difficulty. And then we might end up saying, it's okay, that's too much for you, and accommodate the problem inadvertently. Thinking about blame and defensiveness. So if our young person is struggling, we might be thinking, well, don't look at me, don't blame me, it's my ex, or it's the teacher, or it's the school system, which can be problematic. Or even that sense of like, don't make this about me, sort of that defensive feeling. Sometimes when things are really, really challenging, caregivers can find themselves maybe saying something critical or actually kind of pushing away their young person because it's just so painful to go there. Like saying something like, we wouldn't be in this difficulty if you weren't so sensitive. Or it could be that there's a concern And it's difficult for us to go there, difficult to talk about it. And we'd rather avoid the situation, avoid the difficult emotion, or maybe minimize it, right? Well, it's not really that bad. It should get better. Maybe this is a phase. Maybe this will change. And what I want you to do is like you see that those are the things that are happening above ground, but what is fueling this? And we know that emotion can, one, get a hold of our young people, but for sure can get a hold of parents and really sort of hook us. We talk about stuck emotion and be the reason behind some of those challenging patterns that we find ourselves in. So fear is a big one, right? Just the fear, is my child going to be okay? If I do something, am I actually going to make it worse? Can keep us from doing anything at all, right? Kind of holding back. The grief of, like, when you think about when your little one was born and how you pictured things would be, it did not include them struggling so much. And so the grief of a lost dream or lost opportunities for a child can be overwhelming and maybe lead to a feeling of helplessness. Lots of parents will say, like, I would do anything, but I don't know what to do. I don't know what that thing is. And that can get them sort of paralyzed and stuck. Or shame. Well, as I said before, often asking, is it something I did? Is it something I didn't do? Can be paralyzing. Shame of, like, seeing my child struggle, and shame of knowing that somehow, people might be pointing the finger at us, or self-blame where we're doing that ourselves. And then there's hopelessness, like just that sense of, like, will this ever get better? So thinking about this impact and thinking about the emotions that can get us as caregivers kind of stuck, we have a question to ask. Thinking about fear, shame, self-blame, hopelessness, helplessness. When you're thinking about how to best support your young person who is struggling with mental health difficulties, which of these feelings do you think comes up for you most often? Would it be fear? Wow. Someone just binged on the fear right away. We know, right? Self-blame and shame, that comes up. Yeah. It's so challenging to have those emotions because, as we know, all you want is the best for your child. And when Joanne and Adele were constructing this approach, they did a lot of research and talked to a lot of caregivers, and they heard this over and over and over and realized that folks they want to do whatever they can for their kids, and these emotions can get them stuck. So thank you so much for answering that and sharing that. Okay, so there is a question here. Although caregivers may not cause mental health difficulties, can we contribute to the enhancement of these difficulties? I often feel like my responses to my child's struggles sometimes seem to worsen what they face. My heart goes out to you just when I read that question, because I think this is a question that many, many parents are asking themselves. And I guess I would say to you that I'm going to introduce the skill of emotion coaching that very much speaks to the second part of that, right? In terms of how you respond to your child. Because I think it is true that there are ways we respond that can help them move forward toward healing. And there are ways that we respond that kind of can keep them stuck or maybe inadvertently make things more difficult. Hopefully that was a helpful answer. Please comment if you'd like me to say a bit more about that. Oops. Yeah, okay. So why do we avoid our loved ones' feelings? Like, these emotions come up and it's really tough for us to go in there and respond to and embrace the emotion. And I think one of the key ones is we want to free them from emotional pain. And we have this idea that, maybe if I go in there and I name and respond to the fear that they're feeling or the deep sadness or the anger, it's only going to make them experience their pain more. So that can get us stopped. Their emotional pain causes us emotional pain. It's just so difficult for a parent to look at their child and see them suffering. To see your child suffering brings up emotional pain for us, and we don't want to go there. Who wants to experience emotional pain? So that can keep us avoiding. We don't know what else to say because we don't want to make it worse. Or maybe we don't agree with or understand the pain. Maybe we have this idea like that's what you're so upset about. Like I don't get it. It doesn't make sense. And then it can be really hard to get in there and respond to it effectively. Whoops, there was one that didn't show up. Can I go back? Yeah, we weren't taught how to respond to emotional pain. And I think this is so important for us to remember that in our culture, in our society, when there are big emotions, I know myself, growing up, if we experience big, strong emotion, we might get messages like, settle down, calm down, it's not okay to be angry. Suck it up, buttercup is a phrase. I didn't hear that growing up, but a lot of people mention that one. We just weren't taught how to respond to emotional pain. So no wonder we avoid. And so here I am saying, approach. Why approach emotion? So we call this strengthening relationships with validation. The number one reason to move in and approach your child's emotion is based in relationship, right? You want your child to feel like you get it. Maybe you never will get exactly how they feel, but it makes sense to you that they are doing what they're doing. Their experience is so painful from their point of view, because then they do not feel so alone. It's a horrible place to be, to feel alone in great emotional distress. So to strengthen the relationship, for you to give those messages is so helpful. That if we approach emotion, the child learns emotional challenges are part of life and can be dealt with. And there are so many messages that they're getting from social media, from their friends, from television, that, all the other people have this perfect life and no emotional pain, when the reality is that we all have emotional pain. We all experience the joy and the suffering of life, and it can be managed. I meet so many young people who are, at the point of giving up. They're thinking like, I can't take it. And so they develop problematic coping, right? They start thinking that I need to do something to get rid of the pain. And we're going to be asking you as the caregiver to rather support them to approach their emotion. We talk about name it to feel it. And this is something that has been developed by Dr. Dan Siegel. He's done a lot of research that shows that literally by naming the emotion, we start to quiet the activity in the brain. So approaching helps to quiet things, whereas our fear is that we're going to make it worse. It's actually going to support. So why approach? So emotion coaching is the skill that we want to teach to you. It's very simple looking and yet tough to do, right? So it consists of 2 steps. The first step is simply to validate. And this little script is one that I hope that you will take away from this webinar and practice and be able to use as things come up, where you just first want to name the pain. I get why you feel, whether it's sad, angry, afraid, and then give 3 reasons. That's why we have the 3 becauses there. Because and because and because. If we can get in there and give them reasons, it makes sense to me that you would feel this way because they get the message that we have a better understanding of their experience. It's not about how we would experience it, but how they experience. So we have the becauses there. It's kind of like a little prompt. It's not that you have to have this script of always saying because. It's like to help you remember. If I can use that emotion word and give 3 reasons why it makes sense to me that they would be having that experience from their perspective. That is validation. There's a lovely little phrase that says, emotions are not always logical, but they are always valid. The second step in emotion coaching is support. So first you validate to calm how the person is feeling, and then you have access to actually provide support. And that might be supporting the emotional need or the practical need. And I'll explain a little bit more about that in a moment. How are we doing for time? Good? We're good. Okay. So this is the part where I get to invite Louise to come in and do a little bit of a role play with me, which I very much appreciate that you are willing to do this, Louise. So I think we determined if we just moved our chairs back a little bit, so hopefully this will work. There we go. Okay. So you can see on the slide from but to because. Okay. Usually, if we are talking to somebody who's like, oh, I get how you're sad, and then we want to say, but, because we have a reason, like usually we want them to do something, right? But I'm going to walk us through a little bit of an exercise just to show a little bit, sort of get the experience. So if you can kind of put yourself in Louise's shoes, to like, how is she experiencing this? Maybe experience it along with her. It may be helpful. So I'm going to give an example, but before validating, I'm actually going to invalidate, right? Okay. So I want you, Louise, to think that, so I was kind of looking for an example of somebody was angry, that it would be easy to validate that, right? You'd be like, okay, that makes sense. And so I want you to picture that you are a young person, you've had your birthday, you've got your favorite birthday cake, there's one piece left, you're coming home from school, and you have a plan to eat it, but it's not there. So I want you to just role play that to me, and I will invalidate.
Okay, I like cake. This should be good. I just got home from school and I was so looking forward to having that last piece of cake. It's my favorite one. It's my birthday and I was saving a piece for today because I had a big test and I really wanted to have that cake. And I opened the fridge and it wasn't there. I looked in the sink and there was a dirty plate and a fork there, and that means somebody ate my cake. I'm so mad.
Yeah, I hear you mad. But you know what? The last thing you need is another piece of cake. Okay, so we're done. So that was invalidation. You were angry. What was it like to be invalidated?
I just felt the surge of anger come up. I was really frustrated and angry about the cake being missing because I wanted the cake. And then I just felt this anger of someone, how dare you say that it didn't matter, that I didn't get my cake.
Okay, so you really illustrated that I totally missed the mark, right? Because in order to have a conversation about this, because this is like a nasty thing that's happened to you, I would want you to be calm, right? So I've missed the mark because you came in angry and actually your anger got bigger.
Yes, it did.
Yeah. And yet it's kind of like, it's not unusual that we would say something like that, right? Because I'm thinking, you've already had a lot of cake, right? And the last thing you need is another piece of cake. So it's tough for me to get in there. That's where the but comes in. My agenda comes up. Okay. We're going to do a redo, but this time I'm actually going to validate, right? So I'm going to try to name the emotion and give you 3 becauses. I'm going to say the becauses so we can count them.
Okay. So I'm going to come home from school again. I'm so frustrated. I just opened the fridge to eat the last piece of cake that I was saving for today. It was my favorite cake from my birthday, and I had a big test, and I wanted that cake as soon as I got home from school, and it's not there. I saw a dirty dish in the sink. I know somebody ate it. I'm so mad. Why would someone eat my cake?
Yeah, well, no wonder you're so mad. Like, wasn't it your favorite cake?
Yeah, they don't have that all the time.
I know. That was like the chocolate cake with the double chocolate icing.
Yeah.
Like, no wonder you were mad, right?
Yeah.
Like, last piece. And I heard you, like, you were planning on, like, you'd worked so hard to study for that test. You were saving it because that was going to be your reward.
I was really looking forward to it.
No
and
wonder.
Now I don't have it.
no wonder you're so angry. And when you open the fridge, there's probably nothing in there that compares. I'd be ticked off too.
Yeah, and it was my birthday cake.
Okay. Okay, we have time. So, what was it like to be validated?
I didn't feel that same surge of anger. I felt like you got it, that you understood, and that that angry feeling that I'd had before, just it wasn't there. Everything just felt like it spread out. The frustration was still there, but I didn't feel like it was ramping up.
Yeah, so interesting, right? Because I think that sometimes it's hard for us to think about validating because we don't want to make it worse, right? And interestingly enough, the more that I sort of told you how I got it, your anger started to come down. And I also had the sense you wanted to tell me more.
Yeah, I felt myself like trying to talk to, have a conversation about it.
Because I'll often say to parents, so was that door open or door closed? First time it was door slammed, right? Second time you're like, you actually wanted to tell me more, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So when we talk about, it's frozen. So when we talk about,
maybe we should just check in. Can you guys see us okay still? Let's hope this didn't freeze. Oh, it's all good? Okay, there we are. Okay, it froze at our end, so we just wanted to make sure. Okay, sorry, Mary.
Yes. Okay, my train of thought. So, the agenda, validation, right? I lost my train of thought about that particular point. However, I want to move into just another version of this exercise, right? So that was something that we thought, well, sure, most people could get on board and be able to validate that, right? Even then, the agenda comes up. However, when there's something that's tough to validate, and what I hear a lot about is young people who don't want to go to school, right? And I think that's right across the ages, right? So the little ones, the grade school, high school, and even going into secondary, post-secondary education, going to school is a big issue.
Absolutely.
So I don't know if you've ever had that experience, of what it's like if one of your kids don't want to go to school. And they're really struggling, so they've had their painful experience. We need them to have an optimal response from the environment, and they're going to be tough to do. Okay. So what I want you to do, though, is I want you to be your child who doesn't want to go to school, and I will validate.
Okay. All right.
First, as a first step.
Okay. I'll probably think of myself from the perspective of of multiple children kind of merged together, whose stories I've heard. I don't want to go to school today. School's stupid. There's that test, and I hate tests, and the teacher they don't like me. They don't get me. I just don't want to go.
You know what? You sound frustrated, and I get it, right? No wonder you're frustrated, because here I am saying you got to go to school, and you have a different experience. You get there, and the kids are giving you a hard time. You've got this big test coming up. So no wonder you're frustrated. No wonder you're upset that I'm insisting that you go when you really don't want to go.
No, I don't want to go.
Yeah, that makes so much sense to me. Okay. Now, I will be your child who doesn't want to go to school.
Okay.
And can you follow that same formula? Name the emotion.
All right.
And then give 3 reasons.
Name the emotion, 3 reasons.
That it makes sense from my point of view.
That I am showing that I understand why they might not want to go.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
All right. So my turn.
Okay.
Mom, I don't want to go. I don't want to go to school because, those kids are always picking on me. And besides, I've got that test, and I've been trying to study for it, but I couldn't concentrate, and I don't want to go. I don't want to write the test.
Wow, you really don't want to go to school. There's a lot going on. You feel like your friends or the other kids are picking on you, and there's the test, and that makes you anxious. And I forgot the other one. You just don't want to go. It just feels like it's too much.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Okay. So just checking in, right, when it comes time to validate something like that. Because bottom line, we want our kids to go to school, right? Having an education is important. What was it like to have to come up with reasons to validate something that you can't agree with?
I think that it was hard. And in fact, like, we have a recording here. I could go back. I don't think I actually named an emotion.
I noticed that.
I think I skipped that. I just did the reflective listening, which is maybe not quite the same thing.
Yeah.
I probably should have said that you're really frustrated that I'm asking you to go to school when you don't want to go, and then there was the becauses.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was hard.
It is. No, it is. It's really hard. I think, as I said, it sort of looks simple, like really basic, but because it's different, it's like learning a new language, right? It takes so much practice to be able to kind of like move in and go like, right, what's it like from their perspective? And when I'm talking to parents, they're often like, they are thinking about, I need them to go to school. And it's hard to think about going there because we are worried that if we do that, the kids are going to look at us and say, oh, I don't have to go.
That's right. Mom gets it. I don't have to go.
Yeah.
Yes, so that was difficult. And actually, if I could add on there, and hopefully other people have some thoughts there as well, that because I was thinking so hard about listening and knowing, okay, I'm going to be looking for the reasons, I don't think I was tracking as carefully what was actually being said. So I assume this is something that it's a practice, and you start to be able to pick it up more easily.
Yeah. And one of the things that parents often say is, well, if I have to name the feeling, I don't always know how they feel, right? Because they may be saying, like, asking the kid, like, what's going on? How do you feel? What's up? No, nothing. Everything's fine, right? And so what we say is guessing is actually more helpful than asking, how do you feel? And so if you had said to me when I had that, if you had responded like, I get why you're so sad, wouldn't have landed. I would likely have said, I'm not sad, I'm mad, right?
Right.
Which actually gives you information and the young person information because they're often really confused about their emotional experience. So that helps them to go like, oh, it's actually something else.
So it might be hard for them to name it, and that's certainly something I've seen. You get a lot of the I don't know. And instead, if you say something that's not quite right, they're going to know it's not quite right and let you know.
Exactly. And so this is why we talk about emotion coaching, right? So the caregiver is taking the role of emotion coach, including naming the emotion, even if it's a guess, right? To name it to tame it, starts to quiet things down, and then to talk about like why it makes sense actually helps the young person to understand their experience, which helps them then process it and move through.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Thank you.
It takes a lot of practice, but thank you. Thank you so much for working through that.
We'll check in and see if people have any comments or questions from that.
Okay. Comment. Is there?
Let's see.
Want me to wait for a little question or keep going?
I know there might be some.
I'm asking Louise to do double duty here, right? The questions and the role play. So I apologize. I should be validating you.
It's all good. Thank goodness we got Haruka working as well. And I do see one comment that was added there that might actually be a really good fit to that. One of the kind of our own agenda pieces that comes up for us.
Yeah, I feel I need to mobilize, and get to work on this issue. Oh, I thought you were going to say get to work, but get to work on this issue with my child. Not specifically a negative feeling, rather time to address this. And it would be really helpful if you could give a little bit more information about that, actually, of that comment. Because it sounds like not specifically a negative feeling. I'm not sure if you're talking about your own emotional experience as a caregiver, or it seems like that, or your child, but yes.
I think that's what that one was coming from.
Yes.
One of those feelings that is that first reaction that we might have.
Yes. And so helpful to notice, like, what is our agenda? What comes up that makes it hard to move into validation? Okay. So that was just like such a quick little piece, a little tiny bit in a nutshell about validation. As you could tell, it would take a lot of practice. We talk about before you validate, check yourself. So it's like, oh, I can see big emotion over there. I need to breathe. What am I going to name it? And what are the reasons I can give that let them know I understand from their point of view? Whoops, I keep hitting the wrong button. Okay, it doesn't have to reflect the reality is a really important piece to think about because it's their reality, right? Not ours. And when I'm talking to caregivers, I often give the example of, I have 3 adult daughters, and when they were in high school and they had romantic interests, and they'd be coming home and talking about somebody, and I might be thinking, please do not bring that person home. That might be my reality. And then another day they come home and they're like, oh, so heartbroken because the person that they really liked and they were really wishing that, they could get together is now off with somebody else. And so in order for me to be able to really validate, I have to be able to put myself in their shoes, not my like, oh, good, glad that they're coming around, but rather from their perspective. So to be able to say, I get it. I get how you're feeling so sad because that is a person you've liked for such a long time, and because you thought you had so much in common, and you're worried that if they don't like you, then nobody ever will. It makes sense to me that you're so sad. That's not my reality, it's theirs.
There's actually a few questions and comments
Okay,
there now.
all right. So here, this
list right here. Yep.
Okay.
There you go.
What if I really just cannot understand why they feel this way? Previous to role play. Well, I think this is a really common question that comes up, that sometimes parents will say, I just don't even really know what's happening with them, so it's really hard for me to respond to give those reasons. And what I think is really helpful is if you can name the emotion and then yourself connect with the emotion. So let's say it is a sadness, right? That you can see they're experiencing a deep sadness and you're just not sure what that's about. It's hard for you to understand what the sadness is about. It can be helpful to connect with the time where you felt a deep sadness and even respond to that. So I get how it's just so tough to be in this spot of feeling so sad because you don't feel like doing anything. You don't want to go out. You just want to stay in your room. And I can get how that would be so paralyzing. So you instead are responding to the emotional experience that they're having can be helpful. Is it possible for this way of validating to agitate my child more than they already are? I'm worried about making their feelings even bigger. I think that speaks one of the fears that we have when it comes to validating, for sure. And if you're speaking about anger, then I think it is one of the toughest emotions to validate. And typically, if we actually really validate the anger, if we kind of like, are able to name the thing that makes them feel so angry, we are doing that door open, and they're likely to tell us other things that they are angry about. So it could be that in the short term, there will be bigger emotion. And what we know is that unexpressed anger is actually toxic. So you are helping them by being there and allowing them to have the opportunity to name and process that anger. So yes, there may be some feelings that are bigger in the short term, which would lead to healing in the long term. Hopefully that's helpful. And it seems that as you validate the child with multiple becauses, it's putting more players on the child's team and strengthens the child. Not sure exactly what you mean by that, but I guess my thought is that yes, when you're validating the child, they in terms of strengthening their team, like they begin to understand their experience better. Absolutely. And we do want to strengthen the child. I guess I'm not sure if you're talking about, is the child then more powerful than the adult, which would be problematic because always we want the caregiver parent to be in the lead and be able to give their child confidence that they know the way, even if it's, I will not give up. I will keep asking questions and we'll figure this out. And maybe I need to talk to more people. But that sense of in the lead is really important. Hopefully that's helpful as well. Do you think that answered the question?
Yeah, if any clarification comes forward.
Okay. Okay.
There's one more question.
There is one more down there? Oh, I love it. All these questions. Okay. What happens when your child does not vocalize their feelings? Yes. So there's two things here. So we do want our children to have an emotional vocabulary. So we want to, as much as possible, help them to be able to name what their feeling is and vocalize it. So sometimes we have to actually teach our children the language. So we kind of read their body language and give them the words that would start to explain their emotional experience. The second point is you might be talking about silence. And I said that anger is one of the hardest states to validate, and silence is the second that is the hardest to validate. I don't know which is harder. It's when you're not getting any kind of response from your child, when they kind of shut down, then we need to actually go in and validate the silence. And by that, I mean to be able to say to them, like, you know what, I can see that you just don't want to talk anymore. And it makes so much sense to me that you're not wanting to speak because and you have to come up with some reasons, which might be because before, when you were trying to talk, you didn't feel like anyone was listening or that anybody got it, or you've tried so many things before and you feel like nothing is working, and so you are quiet. And then the most important step is to make sure you say to them, I get it, no pressure to talk, and I will be back, right? So I'm going to leave you to be on your own for a little bit and I will be back. So the message being no pressure to talk, and I will always be there to support you. Because I think what happens is sometimes when we get that silence, we interpret it as like being rude or, pushing us away. And we might react with, okay, fine, you don't want me, I'm out of here. And what your child really needs to know is that you will always be there. So to say, maybe this isn't the time, maybe another time would be better. I'm not giving up. I will be back is important. Okay. This whole thing here?
Yep, we just got the follow-up. You weren't sure?
Okay. About the child's team. I think it provides the support the child needs, even though they don't know how to ask for it. Yes, you did answer the question. Okay, great. Great. Yes, but I do want to just follow up on that, even though they don't know how to ask for it, because that is a huge part of the difficulty, is that they can't name their experience or ask for help. And so by us moving in to be the emotion coach, then we are helping them to do that for themselves eventually. Okay, you good? Okay, so we talked about step 1 is validate, step 2, support. And when we talk about support, it's the emotional need and the practical need. So starting with the emotional need, every emotion has a need. Sadness calls for soothing and comfort. So if we validate, I can see that you're so sad and it makes sense to me because, then we move in and offer soothing. So for some young people, that could be a hug. For others, maybe not, they don't like to be touched. Maybe it's, can I make a cup of tea? Can we sit down and watch a show? Can we go for a walk? Can I just sit quietly here with you for a while? Like that soothing comfort. Anger is a very different emotion, and anger calls for feeling heard. So we need to know that people hear us and like, what is making us so angry? But then to give space. So when someone is really angry, we don't typically go in and reach for a hug because they are needing physical space at that point. They need to be able to set a boundary. We can sometimes have to set a boundary for them. And it's important that they have a chance to voice what's making them so angry so they feel heard. Shame, when a young person is feeling shame, which is very different than guilt. So guilt is I've done something and I can move to make a repair. Shame is like what's left over, like how I feel about myself, calls for reassurance. So first we validate their emotional experience, give them some reasons, and then move in to reassure them that they have strengths, that they have the ability to move forward, that we will always be with them no matter what, that kind of reassurance. Anxiety. So we talk about fear being sort of the primary emotion that happens. And if fear is not supported, then anxiety can develop where there's sort of fear of different situations. Now, with anxiety, what we actually need is support to challenge the anxiety, to face those fearful situations in short little bits. So supportive exposures, meaning small steps to do the thing that we experience is so scary. And then with that extra support over time, it is not as scary as before, and we can approach. Practical support can be setting limits. So if somebody is really highly emotionally distressed and wanting to engage in a problematic behavior, as the caregiver, we name the emotion, validate, and move in to set a limit. Like, it's not okay. We definitely want them to express their emotion, express their anger, but if tables are flipping over and, chairs or things are being damaged or someone's about to be hurt, we have to go in and set a limit. Redirect. So if we're with somebody in their emotion, then eventually we might get to a point of like, okay, we've had a chance to really talk about this. Now let's go for a walk. Let's go watch something funny. Let's watch a cat video on YouTube. To redirect after they've had the opportunity to process their emotion. And then problem solve is actually, what are some steps we can take here to maybe start to address this problem more in the fix-it range. And we say especially if young people are experiencing bullying or some kind of unsafe relationship, they need the adults to move in with them and help them to problem solve in order to ensure safety. So practical tips, and this is sort of moving to the end of the presentation, one of the last slides really, is just to remind ourselves that validation is critical. Because what do we want more than anything for our young people is we want them to be successful in life. We want them to be able to problem solve for themselves, regulate their own emotion. But if we are going to be moving into emotion coach, we want that door open, right? So we talk about validation opens the vault before we can go to step 2, which is offer the emotional support, offer the practical support. And the investment that we make in validating, it's like establishing a lovely, strong foundation in your relationship. All of those messages, like, you know what, I am working so hard to understand your experience. Maybe I'm not getting it 100%, but I'm giving you the message. I really want to understand what it's like for you. It's such an investment in the relationship and allows for the child or youth to just be more willing to have you be there and be part of the solution, be there to support them. Then it says, you need to be ready for validation whack-a-mole. This is often the experience where a young person will be distressed about something. We go in and we validate the sadness. And then up comes the anger. We have to validate, oh no, we have to validate the anger. And then that goes down. And up comes fear. And it's like, oh yeah, and you know what else? So being ready, sort of, if you start to move in and provide this validation, it, as I said, opens the door for more communication. And so prepare yourself that just going in and validating the one thing doesn't mean like, oh, phew, all done. It's likely to start popping up all over the place because when you're good at it, they'll be looking for more. And then practice. So practice, practice, practice. Otherwise, you're just going to go to the usual, right? The sort of like, I see you feel sad, but this is my agenda, and so you have to follow it. And I think practicing in the not intense emotion, but maybe kind of lower emotion situations makes it easier to do when emotions are high. And I suggest to people practice with your partner, practice with the people at work, practice with your other kids, like practice everywhere. And soon it will become second nature and much easier to validate. Okay. I know that we will have an opportunity for a few more questions. I think we still have time. Is that right? Mm-hmm. But before that, I just want to direct you to this website. So emotion-focused family therapy is an approach that is being used all over the world, actually, and all across Canada. And this particular website, Mental Health Foundations, was set up to support parents, to support clinicians who are wanting to learn the approach. If you go to this link, specifically to the parent coaching, they have put up a number of webinars that show more than the emotion coaching. Some of the other skills of EFFT, talking more about the experience of that stuck emotion for parents, and they are free. You'll see there's a donate button. You do not need to feel obligated to push that. You can watch all of these webinars without any charge whatsoever. And we certainly have heard from parents that they found them very, very helpful. So I'd encourage you, if this is resonating and sounding interesting, to go to that website and you will have access to much more material. Okay. And I'm just looking to see if any other questions came up or comments or.
I'll just jump in and I put a little comment there in the discussion box to let you know that that link, the recording for this session and other links as well will be on the resource page for this session, and you'll be able to find that on the Your Space Hamilton website, and you'll get a follow-up email with the link for that as well. And there is another question that we're going to post, so if anyone does have any other final thoughts or anything like that that they'd like to ask or share, please go ahead and do so. We'll pop this one into the discussion box as well, and I have a feeling that this may be something others have experienced.
Okay. Is that so now that's down here, is it?
Yep.
Okay. Okay. If in the past my family has not had a relationship where this openness and vulnerability was possible, how do we begin to repair our relationships and respect the boundaries that we've all set up really high with one another? I think that's such an excellent question, and I think it's an experience that a lot of people have. And so I encourage parents to be really transparent. So I know I've had parents say to me, well, if I go home and I start doing this, my young person is going to say, like, who are you? Like, what alien took my parent? Like, what's happening here? And so I encourage them to be transparent, to say, okay, so here's the thing. We've been trying a lot of things. We've approached this in many different ways, and it hasn't always worked. That there's been a lot of pain and difficulty, and so I want to try something new. And yeah, maybe it's going to sound awkward, and maybe you're going to have some questions about that. I want you to know that I'm doing this because I really want our relationship to be the best that can be. I want you to be the best that you can be. And so I'm going to take the risk of doing things a little bit differently. And I think especially when you're talking about vulnerability, I think that how you role model that is key. So if a parent is willing to be vulnerable, and even if it's in small steps and a little bit, it's like, what an important message to our kids. Because that, difficult emotions come up and they are manageable. you're living it by being vulnerable yourself and open, and your kids will see that it's possible to do that and get through. In fact, to move through to the other side. Hopefully that was helpful. If I can expand on that, just let me know.
We're just about to just add our rather simple little thank you page here.
Okay.
It's much tinier than we normally would have had. There we go.
Okay.
Oh, now that's too
there
big.
we are. Yes. Yeah. I want to add thanks to Carrie too. I'm sorry that she wasn't able to be here, because as we talked about this, I know that at the Youth Wellness Center, they support families in such beautiful ways, and that they are really committed to this approach, the emotion-focused family therapy approach. We've had clinicians, sort of collaborating, working together. And so thank you to Carrie for, I know that she is here in spirit and that she really believes in this approach.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Marlene, and thank you to Carrie as well. And knowing that these kind of supports and opportunities for learning, these are ways that we can help all the people in our lives and connect with them, not just those that are facing some mental health concerns. So it's really fantastic that we can learn these skills and that they're out there in our community. And thank you everyone for joining tonight and participating and asking such great questions. I see a few thank yous, and we really appreciate that you are here. These sessions are developed in collaboration, or topics are chosen in collaboration with families, and so we always want to hear from you about what you thought and what else you would like to see in the future. There are more Eurospace sessions coming, and you can visit the website and look at the upcoming sessions and check out the resources of previous sessions, and of course share with the young people in your lives as well, because we have sessions for youth as well. So thank you very much, everyone. And if you have any follow-up questions or anything like that, don't hesitate to send us an email, and we'll do our best to follow up with you. Thank you, everyone. Take care.
Good night.